Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the second shelf on this beautiful, very warm Sunday here in Germany. I want to talk to you about the books I read recently, so recent reads. There was only three that I find worthwhile talking about. It's a mixed bag still, but they are worth talking about. And the first book I want to talk to you about is a book that has made the rounds on BookTube, has been reviewed everywhere. So if you're sick and tired of talking about this book or hearing other people talk about this book, The Immortalist by Chloe Benjamin, just skip ahead a couple of minutes. Anyway, this book was released the beginning of this year, and it's Chloe Benjamin's second novel. She's a young American writer, and her debut, which came out 4 years ago in 2014, Anatomy of Dreams, I really enjoyed. So I was looking forward to her second novel, but it was not quite my cup of tea, I have to say, right up front. Anyway, we follow the story of four siblings from 1969 until 2010. The novel is set in New York, east side of New York, and the four children, the Gold children, are between 9 and 13 when the novel starts, so in 1969. And we have the oldest, Varia, then we have Daniel, we have Simon, and we have Clara. We learn in the beginning a little bit about their family. The father is a quite successful clothes maker. The mother, Gertie, worked as a receptionist in a law firm before the children came. So we learn a little bit about this Jewish family and the neighborhood. But the main premise of the book is when the four siblings hear about this fortune teller. And supposedly this fortune teller can tell you exactly when you die, the date of your death. So the four sneak out, go to this fortune teller, and one by one they are told their time of death. We, as the reader, only learn the death or the date of the death from the oldest, Varia. So she will be very old. She will be 88. We don't hear the other's date of death, but we can see, especially Simon, the youngest, that he is quite taken aback. So we can assume that his date of death is early. That is the premise of the book. And then the book explores the clash between, fate. Is everything just fixed and determined? Or do you make your own life, your own future? And in the following chapters, we follow one of the siblings until their death. And we learn about what the fortune teller told them. And we learn how they cope or struggle with the knowledge of their date of death. I found the premise interesting. In the sense that I like reading novels that want to explore ideas, like in this case, the idea whether your future is fixed, whether everything is determined, and the question behind it, what or how would it affect you if somebody told you your date of death? How would it affect your life? Take Simon, for example, the youngest. He, as I told you, is not happy with what he is told, and then he leads a life of adventure, quote unquote, you could say, and freedom. And the question behind it is, would he have done that if he hadn't known what is in store for him? If he hadn't known his date of death, would he have lived a different life? And that goes also for the other siblings, Clara and Daniel. Less for Varia, because we know she's going to be very old. She will die when she's 88, so that's something that doesn't really influence her life. So I thought this idea was interesting, but I couldn't, the execution just didn't convince me. The writing is good. although I think at times it's the style is a bit, the stray to give background information, which takes you off and out of the story. But overall, I thought the writing was good. But the story as such, the plot never really came together for me because of this gimmicky premise. I don't know. It just spoiled it for me. The fortune teller will come back in later in the novel. Has something to do with Daniel, one of the elder siblings, and how he copes with it. I'm a bit lost for words how to explain, but I just thought the story as such did never really come together for me because of this this gimmick in the beginning. But there are people who really liked the book, and I will leave a link to a review that is also a bit mixed, but much more positive, has a much more positive take on the book, and that's by Olive from a book Olive. So I will leave a link down below if you're interested. And if you like Chloe Benjamin's writing from her first book, you might enjoy this, and you might also enjoy it if you just like to read about characters and you don't care about the plot. Then you might enjoy the book much more than I did. And we stay with this theme of fate and changing the future, because after I finished the Immortalists, I thought of one of Ursula Le Guin's early novels, The Lathe of Heaven, which was published in 1971, and I wanted to reread it. I think it has been, I don't know, I don't even want to count the decades since I've last read it, but because it explores similar themes, I reread it. Anyway, Ursula Le Guin doesn't need an introduction. She's one of the best, in my opinion, the best science fiction writers ever, science fiction fantasy, and she sadly passed away a couple of months ago. But she left us with a fantastic body of works, and one of my favorite books by her is The Lathe of Heaven. So in this book, you have three main characters. The book is set in a dystopian future, which, if you read it now, is not really the future anymore, but that's always what you have when you write sci-fi and you set it, and you write it now and you set it in 2040. The people in 2035 will not really think of it as a faraway future. But anyway, that's just an aside. So the book is set in a sort of dystopian future. We learn a little bit about the world and what happened, but the main thing, the main story revolves around three characters. We have George Orr, who is very unhappy with his life because he realized that when he dreams, his dreams become true. So in other words, he changes the world with his dreams. That also means that when he wakes up to a changed world, but he himself remembers the world before. He tries to, stop dreaming, stop sleeping, and through various circumstances, he is referred to a psychiatrist, Dr. Haber, in order to help him, quote unquote. Dr. Haber at a certain point realizes what George can do, and he uses or misuses him rather, because he tries to make George dream certain things that Haber wants the world to be, or how he wants the world to change, with not always really successful results, but I'm not going to spoil you. And then you have the third character, Heather. When we first meet her, she's a lawyer, and George employs her services in order to get rid of Dr. Haber. He has to undergo treatment for various reasons in the plot. No spoilers here. So the central theme is really a moral question. What would you do if you were in Dr. Haber's position? What would you do if you were in George's position? That you would be able to change the world by dreaming about a different world. And it also asks the question of memory and how we remember our world and how we remember history, because it's sort of a bit like in the movie The Matrix, you know. You can ask yourself now whether the world that you remember, if there is a George Orr out there somewhere, whether the world that you remember actually only exists since 10 minutes since George woke up. So it's really interesting, and we see George's struggle, and you can ask the question: is it wrong to want to change the world for the better? I should have probably added, Dr. Haber is not a purely evil man. It's not that he wants the world to change in a way that is worse, or at least for the most part he doesn't. So I thought this is it's obviously a classic in Ursula Le Guin's work, and if you haven't read it and if you're interested in this kind of character-driven but interesting plot-wise a sci-fi novel which also explores really deep ideas of morality and future and fate, then I can highly recommend The Lathe of Heaven. And the last book of the three I want to talk to you about today is a book you've probably also seen going around in BookTube, and that is When I Hit You by Meena Kandasamy. It was released in 2017, and it was longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction this year, and it's now on the shortlist. The prize will be announced later in June, so maybe this is a winner. Meena Kandasamy is an Indian poet, feminist activist. She wrote a previous novel. She was born in 1984, and she lived in India up until 2 years ago when she moved to London, where she now lives. She writes in English, so this is not a translated work. It's originally written in English. It's the novel follows an unnamed first-person narrator, a woman about 25-ish, who is telling us about her abusive marriage. She married, she's a writer, and she married an older man who was her professor, and they both share the very left-wing communist political views. They get married, and he abuses her in every possible way. He, tries to cut her off from the world, so she has to delete her Facebook account. She's not allowed to use her cell phone for more than 3 hours a week. He will beat her, he will rape her. So this is a difficult book to read because it's very raw and very detailed, but it's written to counter the horrors in a quite lyrical, poetical language. Obviously, because the author Kandasamy is a poet, and you can see that, you can feel that when you read it, the way she talks about it. It's an important book, certainly, because it's not only, quote unquote, if that weren't enough, about an abusive singular relationship, but it also explores very thoroughly the circumstances in which a woman would stay in an abused relationship, especially in India. So how the parents react, how the mother reacts, or the father when the woman tells them about the abuse, how society treats women who stay in abusive relationships. So the topic is extremely interesting and urgent. My problem with the book had nothing to do with the language and nothing to do with the writing, and certainly nothing to do with the topic. It was a structural struggle that I had, because part of what makes the book so urgent and so immediate is that you know it's autobiographical. You know it's more or less a memoir in fiction form, because you know that Kandasamy lived through that relationship. that makes it not a very successful novel, in my opinion. But it's not really a very successful memoir either, because it doesn't take the step back that you expect from a memoir, analyzing what happened. So this more, detached way of looking at your life. So in my point of view, that the sort of not quite making up your mind whether it's a memoir or whether it's a novel, made it for me a less good book than it would have been if it just had been, making a clear choice between fiction, to write fiction or to write a memoir. But maybe I'm just, nitpicking here. I don't know. But it's sort of, diminished um, my positive evaluation of the book. But to counter that, I will leave a link to another much more positive review, this time done by Jennifer over at Insert Literary Pun, and she talks at length about this book. And I think if you find what I say interesting, but are not sure whether this is a book for you, you should definitely check out her review, because she is much better in analyzing the book than I could ever be. Anyway, these were the 3 recent reads I wanted to chat with you about. I hope you have enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. Let me know down in the comments whether you read any of the 3 books or whether they interest you, or talk to me about any other recent reads that you've enjoyed. And I will see you all soon in my next video. Bye-bye.